It is 3 in the morning. The temperature has dropped below freezing, and somewhere out in the dark timber, something massive is moving toward your position. You have one rifle, one cartridge in the chamber, and in that moment, you are not thinking about carbon fiber stocks, or modular chassis systems, or anything that came out of a factory last year. You are thinking about the rifle in your hands, whether it will feed, whether it will fire, whether it will stop what is coming. Today, we are counting down the 5 legendary big game rifles that hunters and shooters have trusted in exactly that moment, and why modern production still cannot touch them. Sliding into the 5th spot, and honestly, this one surprises people every single time. The Remington Model 788. Introduced in 1967, discontinued in 1983, and still, to this day, beating rifles that cost 3 times as much at the range. Here is the deal. Remington built the 788 as a budget option, an entry-level workhorse meant to sit below the Model 700 on the shelf and move units. What their engineers accidentally created was one of the most mechanically accurate bolt-action platforms ever manufactured. The secret lives inside that receiver. The 788 runs on a tubular, thick-walled receiver machined from solid chrome moly steel alloy. Now, look at the ejection port on a standard Mauser-derived action. It is a wide, open gash cut through the top of the receiver. The 788 uses a tiny, almost oval-shaped port instead. Less steel removed means more structural integrity. More structural integrity means the receiver does not flex under chamber pressure. And a receiver that does not flex means the barrel returns to the exact same harmonic position after every single shot. That is not a small thing. That is the difference between a 1-inch group and a 3-inch group at 200 yards. Under the hood, the bolt runs 9 locking lugs arranged in 3 rows of 3. And here is what makes that unusual. Those lugs lock at the rear of the bolt, behind the magazine well. No lug raceways cut through the forward receiver ring where pressure peaks. The bolt only needs a 60-degree lift to cycle, which means you can run a low-mounted optic without the handle beating against your scope bell on every reload. Here is the mechanic's insight that most people never talk about. Lock time. The interval between sear release and primer strike on the 788 runs between 2.2 and 2.5 milliseconds. The legendary Mauser 98, that benchmark of bolt-action engineering, runs 5.2 milliseconds. The 788 cuts that number in half. In practical terms, the bullet exits the muzzle closer to the exact moment you decided to break the shot, before your heartbeat or muscle tremor can walk the muzzle off target. No budget polymer rifle rolling off a CNC line today replicates that mechanical advantage. Honest assessment, the 788 feeds from a single-stack detachable box magazine, and aftermarket support is nearly non-existent at this point. Finding magazines is a genuine headache. That is a soft annoyance, a yellow flag, but it is cosmetic to the mission, not a liability to it. Sets you back somewhere between $400 and $700 on the used market today, depending on caliber and condition. For that money, you are buying mechanical accuracy that most modern manufacturers charge $1,200 for and still do not deliver. Moving on, and this next one is where things get genuinely interesting. The Savage Model 99. A lever-action rifle that broke every rule lever actions were supposed to follow, and in doing so, became one of the most mechanically innovative hunting platforms ever built. Now listen. Lever-action rifles in the late 19th and early 20th century were defined by one critical limitation. The tubular magazine running beneath the barrel forced cartridges to stack nose to primer in a line. Load a Spitzer bullet, a pointed, aerodynamically efficient projectile, and the recoil of firing could drive that sharp tip into the primer of the round sitting directly in front of it. The result was a catastrophic chain detonation inside the magazine. so lever guns were locked into flat nose and round nose bullets. Blunt, slow, and bleeding velocity fast beyond 150 yards. Arthur Savage looked at that problem and threw the entire magazine concept in the trash. The Model 99 was built around a spring-loaded rotary spool magazine housed in the receiver itself. A solid brass drum holding 5 cartridges in completely isolated chambers, rotating them one at a time into the feed position. Because no round ever pointed its tip at another round's primer, the 99 could safely feed high-pressure Spitzer ammunition, the same aerodynamic, flat-shooting projectiles used in bolt-action rifles. Cartridges like the .250 Savage, the .300 Savage, the ballistic grandfather of the .308 Winchester, and eventually the .243 Winchester. Lever action velocity and handling, bolt action ballistics. That combination had never existed before. Here is the mechanic's insight. The 99 ditched the exposed external hammer entirely, running a concealed internal striker-fired system instead. An external hammer requires a wide arc of travel before it strikes the firing pin. That arc costs time. The 99's linear, spring-driven internal striker delivers primer ignition almost instantaneously, producing lock times that rival bolt-action platforms. For a lever gun, that is extraordinary. Beyond that, the solid steel receiver top and side ejection port allowed hunters to mount magnified optics directly over the bore, something Winchester's top-ejecting lever guns made nearly impossible for decades. The brass rotary counter, visible through a small window on the left side of the receiver, told the shooter exactly how many rounds remained. In 1899, that was cutting-edge ammunition management. Honest assessment, the 99 is mechanically complex compared to a Winchester 94. That rotary spool requires more precise tolerancing, and parts availability today is genuinely limited. Finding a gunsmith who truly understands the internals takes effort. Yellow flag on serviceability, not on performance. The damage to your wallet on a clean Model 99 runs anywhere from $500 to over $1,000, depending on the variant and caliber. For a lever action that shoots like a bolt gun, that price is not just fair, it is a bargain. Now we get serious, and this next one is going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. The Remington Model 760 Gamemaster, a pump-action centerfire rifle. And before you close the tab, hear this out. Pump-action rifles have carried a reputation problem for decades. Serious precision shooters dismiss them as deer camp workhorses. Accurate enough to fill a tag, never accurate enough to impress anyone at a bench. That reputation was earned by every other pump-action centerfire ever built. It was not earned by the 760. Here is what Remington's engineers did differently, and this is where the mechanical story gets genuinely remarkable. On every other pump-action design, the bolt locks into the receiver walls themselves. That means the receiver has to absorb the full chamber pressure of firing, pressures regularly exceeding 50,000 pounds per square inch on cartridges like the .30-06 and the .270 Winchester. To handle that load, the receiver has to be massive and rigid, and a massive, rigid receiver creates problems the moment you attach a sliding pump mechanism to it, because now you have moving parts pressing against the same structure that is trying to hold harmonic stability. Remington's solution was to remove the receiver from the pressure equation entirely. Under the hood, the 760 runs a 14-lug interrupted thread bolt that locks directly into a hardened steel barrel extension, a separate steel sleeve that is part of the barrel assembly itself, not the receiver. Chamber pressure is fully contained within the barrel and its extension. The receiver never sees that force. Because the receiver is no longer a pressure vessel, it can be lighter, and more importantly, it does not flex or deform under firing stress. The later Model 7600 refined this to 4 larger radial lugs for smoother cycling and increased durability, but the core principle remained identical. Here is the mechanic's insight that separates the 760 from everything else in its category. Because the bolt locks into the barrel extension and not the receiver, the pump linkage rods and the wooden forend never touch the barrel. The barrel is completely free-floating, extending out of the receiver with zero contact from the pump mechanism running beneath it. Free-floating barrels are the standard on precision target rifles precisely because external pressure changes barrel harmonics. A hand gripping the forend tighter, a bipod touching the barrel, a branch pressing against the wood. All of it shifts point of impact. The 760 eliminates that variable entirely on a pump-action platform. Nobody else ever pulled that off. The FBI recognized what civilian shooters were slow to accept. They purchased 30-06 and 308 Winchester variants for field agents beginning in 1965, specifically because the 760 delivered bolt-action accuracy with a follow-up shot capability that no bolt gun alive could match in dense cover. I know some of you are going to push back hard on a pump-action placing this high. Drop your take in the comments. Tell me I am wrong and explain why. Honest assessment. The 760's action requires more deliberate maintenance than a bolt gun. Carbon buildup in the pump linkage can create gritty cycling if neglected over a long season. Yellow flag on maintenance discipline, not on mechanical integrity. You are looking at roughly $350 to $600 on the used market for a solid 760 or 7600. For a free-floating barrel on a pump platform that the FBI trusted in the field, that number feels almost embarrassing. Entering the elite tier, and this next rifle changed what the shooting community thought casted metal could actually accomplish. The Ruger M77. And the story of how this rifle came to exist is inseparable from the story of one man who refused to accept that forged steel was the only path to a serious hunting rifle. Bill Ruger was obsessed with investment casting long before the firearms industry took it seriously. The process involves pouring molten steel into extraordinarily precise ceramic molds, allowing geometries that traditional forging and machining simply cannot produce without enormous cost. When Ruger brought the M77 to market in the early 1970s, the shooting community greeted those cast receivers with deep suspicion. The assumption was straightforward and reasonable. Cast metal meant porosity, meant weak grain structure, meant a receiver that would crack under the sustained pressure of Magnum hunting cartridges. Independent testing dismantled that assumption completely. Ruger's proprietary alloys and closely guarded heat treatment process produced investment cast receivers and bolts that were measurably harder, more wear-resistant, and more dimensionally consistent than many forged alternatives coming out of other factories at the same time. The casting process also allowed Ruger to integrate features that forged receivers required expensive secondary machining to achieve. The bolt handle was cast as a single integral unit with the bolt body. No brazing, no weld point, no potential separation under hard use. Proprietary scope mounting bases were cast directly into the receiver itself, eliminating the screwed-on rail mounts that loosen under recoil over time and walk point of impact in the process. Here is the mechanic's insight, and this one lives deep in the bedding system where most shooters never think to look. On a conventional bolt-action rifle, the front action screw runs straight up through the stock and threads vertically into the bottom of the receiver. Tighten it down, and it pulls the receiver downward into the wood. What it does not do particularly well is resist the receiver sliding rearward under recoil, a movement that cracks stocks and degrades accuracy over thousands of rounds. Jim Sullivan solved this by drilling that front action screw at a sharp 45-degree angle. When torqued, the angled screw pulls the receiver simultaneously downward and rearward, driving the recoil lug mechanically into its stock mortise, with a wedging force that mimics professional epoxy glass bedding from the factory, without requiring the shooter to ever touch a bedding compound. The result is a steel-to-wood interface that does not shift, does not walk, and does not require retorquing after a season of hard hunting. That system proved robust enough that Ruger eventually chambered the M77 variants in cartridges reaching up to the .416 Rigby and .458 Lot, dangerous game rounds, generating recoil energy that destroys conventionally bedded rifles over time. Honest assessment: early M77 push-feed variants had extractor reliability complaints on hard case extraction in dirty conditions. Ruger addressed this in the Mark II and Hawkeye generations with a full Mauser pattern controlled round feed claw extractor. If you are shopping, hold out for a Mark II or later. Green light on the modern variants. No manufactured complaints needed here. But if you are on a tight budget, the Mark II will sting slightly more at the register than comparable push-feed alternatives. Built for people who buy once and buy right, street price on a used M77 Mark II runs between $550 and $900, depending on caliber and stock condition. A Hawkeye in a dangerous game chambering will push past $1,200. Every dollar is accounted for in the metal. But wait until you see the rifle sitting at number 1. Because everything the M77 does right, number 1 does with half a century more of proven field history behind it, and a trigger that makes every other hunting rifle on this list feel like it has something left to learn. Closer to the crown, and this one was never really a competition. The Winchester Model 70, pre-1964, the rifleman's rifle. And if you have been paying attention to everything on this list, you already know why it lands here. This is the standard against which every other bolt-action hunting rifle on Earth has been measured for the better part of a century. Not because of marketing, not because of nostalgia, because of steel, geometry, and a trigger so clean it makes grown men rethink every rifle they have ever owned. Before 1964, Winchester machined the Model 70 receiver from a single massive forging of chrome moly steel. Not cast, not assembled from stampings. One piece of steel, shaped by pressure and heat until the grain structure of the metal aligned with the geometry of the part, the way nature intended metal to carry load. The result was a receiver with a flat bottom that mated perfectly to the stock, resisting the rotational torque generated by firing with a surface area that no round-bottomed receiver could match. Now here is where the Model 70 separates itself from number 4 on this list. The Ruger M77's angled bedding screw is a brilliant engineering solution to the problem of recoil lug interface. But the pre-64 Model 70 never needed that solution, because its recoil lug was not a solution bolted onto the design. It was machined as an integral part of the receiver itself, one continuous piece of forged steel absorbing recoil and transmitting it directly into the walnut stock with zero secondary interfaces, zero potential movement, zero tolerance stacking. Compare that to the washer-style recoil lugs clamped between barrel and receiver on most modern production rifles, where recoil force has to travel across 2 mating surfaces before it even reaches the stock. Every interface is an opportunity for movement. The pre-64 Model 70 has one interface. The load path is brutally direct. Here is the mechanic's insight, and it is the one that defines this rifle's legacy above everything else. The controlled round feed system. Inherited from the Mauser 98 and refined to perfection, the Model 70's massive non-rotating claw extractor, machined from hardened tool steel, spanning nearly the full diameter of the cartridge head, captures the case rim the instant a round clears the magazine. From that moment forward, the cartridge is mechanically locked to the bolt face for the entire journey into the chamber. It cannot double feed. It cannot tumble free if the rifle is inverted during a fast reload. It cannot fail to extract a pressure-swollen case in extreme heat or cold. Because the claw does not slip, it grips with the mechanical advantage of the entire bolt rotation behind it. The push-feed systems running on most modern production rifles, including early variants of number 2 on this list, simply push the cartridge ahead of the bolt and snap a small spring-loaded extractor over the rim after the bolt closes. In a calm range session, that works perfectly. In a dangerous game scenario where adrenaline causes a short stroke and the cartridge partially ejects before being pushed forward again by the next round, a push feed system produces a double feed malfunction at the worst possible moment. The Pre-64 Model 70 makes that malfunction mechanically impossible. And then there is the trigger. 2 pieces of steel, 1 load-bearing spring, a pair of lock nuts for user adjustment of pull weight and over travel. No housing, no cassette, no polymer components. Because the mechanism is completely open, debris and ice crystals fall through rather than accumulating. In conditions that jam modern enclosed trigger assemblies into unpredictable behavior, the Model 70's trigger continues to break cleanly, described consistently by the shooters who have carried it through Alaska, Africa, and the Canadian Rockies as feeling like a glass rod snapping. Crisp, repeatable, with 0 creep and 0 surprise. That trigger, combined with the forged receiver mass that eliminates harmonic flex, the integral recoil lug that transmits energy without loss, and the controlled round feed system that guarantees function under the worst conditions a hunter will ever face. That combination is why the Pre-64 Model 70 does not merely earn the top spot on this list. It makes the top spot feel inevitable. The Ruger M77 gives you better out-of-box bedding consistency. The Remington 760 gives you unmatched follow-up shot speed. The Remington 788 gives you a lock time that defies its price point. The Savage 99 gives you ballistic capability no other lever gun could touch. The Pre-64 Model 70 gives you all of those principles solved at the receiver level, wrapped in a trigger no production rifle today has honestly surpassed. Winchester introduced it in 1936. They nearly killed it in 1964 by cutting costs and hollowing out everything that made it great. The shooting public noticed immediately, loudly, and without mercy. One of the most documented consumer revolts in American firearms history. The rifles made before that change have only appreciated in value and reputation in the decades since. A clean Pre-64 Model 70 in a standard chambering will run you between $800 and $2,000, depending on caliber, configuration, and condition. A Pre-64 in a desirable chambering like the .375 Holland & Holland or the .300 Winchester Magnum will push considerably past that. Every dollar reflects a rifle that was built when the people making it had not yet learned to cut corners. Watch your 6. I am out. 5 rifles, 5 different mechanical philosophies. One conclusion that the industry has spent 60 years trying to disprove and cannot. The Remington Model 788 proved that a budget rifle built around receiver rigidity and a 2.5 millisecond lock time could embarrass everything above it on the price sheet. The Savage Model 99 proved that a lever action could shoot as flat and as far as a bolt gun the moment someone had the engineering courage to throw out the tubular magazine. The Remington Model 760 Gamemaster proved that a pump action could free-float a barrel and lock directly into a barrel extension, producing bolt-action accuracy with a follow-up speed that no bolt gun alive could answer. The Ruger M77 proved that investment casting, done with genuine metallurgical discipline, could produce a receiver harder and more consistent than many forgings, and that a 45-degree bedding screw could solve stock interface problems that had plagued the industry for decades. And the Winchester Model 70, before 1964, changed everything. Simply proved that when you start with a massive forged receiver, a machined integral recoil lug, a controlled round feed claw extractor, and a 2-piece open trigger that debris cannot jam, you build a rifle that a century of manufacturing evolution has not genuinely improved upon. Modern production is not without merit. Computer-controlled machining delivers dimensional consistency that hand-fitting craftsmen of the 1950s could not achieve on every unit off the line. But consistency of dimension is not the same thing as quality of material, mass of structure, or integrity of mechanical principle. A perfectly consistent polymer stock that flexes under bipod pressure is consistently wrong. A metal injection molded sear that wears faster than a machine steel sear is consistently inferior. Precision in the service of a compromised design is still a compromised design. The rifles on this list were built by engineers who understood that accuracy is a physics problem. Lock time, receiver flex, harmonic resonance, recoil transmission, extractor geometry. These are not preferences. They are variables in an equation, and the men who designed these 5 platforms solved those variables with steel and ingenuity rather than polymer and profit margin. If you hunt dangerous game, the Pre-64 Model 70 and the Ruger M77 Hawkeye in controlled round feed configuration belong on your short list before anything manufactured in the last 2 decades. If you run whitetail in heavy timber, where a second shot decides the season, the Model 7600 has not been replaced. If you want mechanical accuracy from a lever platform that lets you run Spitzer bullets at bolt-action velocities, the Savage 99 remains in a category of 1. And if you want to walk into a rifle match with a $400 used gun and quietly embarrass people shooting $1,200 modern bolt guns, find a clean Remington 788 in 308 and let the target do the talking. These rifles are not museum pieces. They are tools that solved real mechanical problems with real mechanical solutions. And the problems they solved have not changed, even if the marketing language around them has. Train hard, stay safe, and I will see you downrange.